Hello, it is just in the afternoon. Good to see you. Just do. Let's go into there so I can at least see what this is doing. So yeah, another little like news thing. Go into this one. There's a few just little things really. These often are just based on want to accumulate enough links to make it, a short little news thing. Um, so the first one, I do have to tell people that uh, this is I make money from this, but the people that I have written guidebooks for, Rock Facts, have gone into partnership with the BMC, and I think there's now a 15% discount on the app now. So everybody is aware of this. I was one of the authors of their North Wales climb book. I was the author of the North Wales Slate, and also the only author of the Snowdonia Mountain Walks and Scramble. We're just doing a second edition. It's obviously, I think it's going to be at Eddie Snowdonia Mountain Walks and Scrambles, just because we're in a kind of a transition period. Although the actual name of Snowdonia has changed to Erie, it's you know Snowdon Mountain Railway still called Snowdon Mountain Railway. But yeah, so this is like really interesting for me in that yeah, I get paid for people using the app, and when you go on to sort of the areas that I've written, I've also written a couple of other areas to Spain for that. But I went climbing for the first time in a while yesterday. I was out on Idwal Slabs, and the app is has made me realize that people use the app in a different way to use the guidebook. That's like a good half a kilo of dead weight that you can carry up a route. And it was really nice to see actually. I saw a couple of people get out their phones, and they're halfway up a pitch, their phones in their pocket, they're picking it up and they're reading the route descriptions and stuff halfway up a thing. And it's so good to see something that I've been involved with. I don't write any of the code or any of the techno babble that goes into here. I have a little bit of an idea of coding, but like the team that have put that app together have done a fantastic job, and it's just amazing to be part of that. So that's my first one, but I do have to let people know that although I'm kind of promoting this, I, you know, I'm promoting it in a way because I benefit from it, but also I think it's a great app. They have basically they've got guides for most of the UK. They've got a deal with I think SMC in Scotland. They've got loads of stuff in Spain and other countries. So if you are traveling around climbing, it's a great thing. Um, yeah, that's all I want to talk about that. There's another thing on UKC. It's a fossil-free declaration, and it's the IFC who do like the World Indoor Climbing Championships. And there was a little bit of climbing federations show climate leadership by rejecting partnership with industries. So apparently there was a some linking with some Saudi money, and obviously Saudi is obviously where a lot of oil comes from. I kind of think it's great that we're trying to do that, but at the same time, I'm like, this is the IFCS that has, competitions around the world. I know people that are competing it, and their major expense is flying to different competitions. So it it just seems a little bit tricky to understand why it's the link. um this is another one I thought very interesting. So the Cairngorm rescue team was kind of questioning who was insuring it for like public liability and medical malpractice. And I don't know about Scotland, but certainly in the UK, a lot of well, the rescue teams are part of like the National Resilience Force, which is in part organised by the police, which is why you phone police and mountain rescue. But it turns out that Police Scotland would not be providing any of the insurances to these voluntary organisations that help them basically fulfil their requirements under national resilience, which, yeah, you know, they've got a bill of £20,000 just to cover those things, but I think they've got a grant. But it just seems a shame that a mountain rescue team has got to go out and try and fund its insurances, and people like the police aren't actually funding that. I also wonder, like, you know, what happens if, I don't know who, you know, it's very real. There was an incident a couple of years ago when a rescuer had a very serious injury and ended up with life-changing injuries, and I wonder, are they insured in any way under that? It's an interesting thing. The other thing is, I've been looking at statistics. I've went for some other statistics. This is the Mountain Rescue England and Wales annual review. I'll go through it in more detail, but there's really interesting things like Clanberis Rescue Team accounted for 9%. So the Clanberis Rescue Team is that little bit there. And they are responsible for 9% of the rescues in the whole of England and Wales. Just to show you how busy they are. But the other really interesting one, which we'll get into, again, I'll probably have to go into what is up here. It's the 18 to 24-year-olds between 2019 and 2024. There's almost double the number of people involved. So it's like a massive area of this. I would put it down to the TikTok generation. Another thing from Cairngorm is they are now banning barbecues and campfires over summer. It's there's obviously been a lot of stuff in like the Peak District and places like that where, you know, people have caused some quite serious wildfires by having barbecues and stuff. So yeah, it's interesting that they're currently banning it, which is a good thing, I think. Oh yeah, this is another little video. This is, I did one in the last news. This is just another little thing of this glacier that's lost 6 meters of ice in a year for one part again. Just going with the sort of climate change kind of theme that I've gone with a few times now. Okay, yeah, so this, a minute, let me just go back up.
Trad. In sport climbing, we're taught to give dynamic belays, but in trad, you need to be careful about how much slack you give out, especially if there are big runouts or sections where...
So when I've been doing these videos, what I've been trying not to do is put other people's videos up and paint them in a bad light. But having gone through a lot of the BMC data of trad climbs, one of the major issues is gear failure. And Robbie is an extremely good climber, and his advice would be really good for people that are pushing the limits of trad climbing. But 99% of people will probably find some of his advice not the way to go.
You don't want to stand too far back from the wall, as this puts more slack into this.
Yeah, so he goes on about more slack, but actually he doesn't talk about the one issue that this thing does. When you stand back from the wall, it'll be highlighted in his video in a minute, but you put, the potential is to actually lift up and out on the first runners. And he does address this a bit, but he doesn't. It's for me, the video is good, but it suffers from the same thing that a lot of like the TikTok generation. It's a 2-minute video that needed to be like a little bit longer to get some more important facts across.
System. Any fall can create enough force to pull you up the wall, bringing your
Predict the UK budget 2.5 months.
Sorry. Oh, it's gone. If I go back.
climber closer to the ground. The bottom line is, you want to keep slack to a minimum.
And this is really important. Yeah, keep slack to a minimum. In that video, the person was stood right at the bottom of the cliff, so that you're more in line, so the rope doesn't get pulled out. I'm gonna later on in this video, it gives a really good example of what happens when the rope you're away from the edge. And this video is great if you are climbing these kind of hard E6s and E7 that have, like, you know, places where it's unprotected, and if you fall off, you need somebody to take rope in rapidly and not give you a soft catch because you'll hit the ground. And the video kind of covers that well.
I'd rather have a slightly uncomfortable fall than one where I hit the ground. Your beelie stance is critical when beelieing run-out routes. You need enough.
So you can't quite see it here, but because this goes here, and if this went sort of straight up, the resultant vector force out is in this direction. If you can see that, it's kind of going up here. There's a much better example of this in a minute. And so for the majority of climbers, we don't go on super run out stuff, so we don't put ourselves into this position.
Space to jump back or to the side and take in slack quickly in the event of a fall. Before the climb, I always make sure to plan with my partner where I should move if they fall. Look at the area around the base and choose where I could jump or run to.
I mean, this is kind of reasonable stuff, but, you know, for the majority of people trad climbing, you know, especially on like I've mentioned in some of my other videos on short crags where that angle becomes more exaggerated because the routes are quite short.
In some cases, the base of the climb might be bouldery or on the side of a cliff with nowhere to run. In these situations, I anchor myself to the ground or to a big boulder or a crack in the wall so I don't get pulled up if the leader falls. On climbs with large runouts where your climber could get close to the ground, you can make things safer by placing a couple of low runners.
Okay, so in this little bit, he's not that far from the wall, but because he's put these low runners in, what they're actually getting, you can actually see them getting pulled up and out. Now, what he doesn't explain here is he's deliberately placed cams into the rock and he's got them orientated in the direction of pull, which is, you know, out rather than down. And without this, you know, I know people that have used this technique on some, you know, hard stuff, and they've actually made a belay here specifically for that direction of pull. And it's just one of those things. It's like some of this advice is really good, but some of it is just too much for people that are starting out. You know, what they need is to place good gear. They need to be aware that low early runners can have this kind of vector force on them. Yeah, and it's like I say, it's not a really bad example. It's just an example that in the context of a short kind of Twitch video, you're not getting the nuanced arguments out, and it's kind of it's almost one of the reasons why I don't really want to make short form videos, is because I think a lot of the stuff in climbing requires nuanced answers where, you know, often the safety comes in from people recognizing that, you know, those two early runners, they weren't wires, because if they were, they would have been ripped out straight away. This is a thing about complacency. It's Will Gadd, and he talks about what he does. We try to stay alert, but actually that's not what you do, and actually there's other things. and I think he talks about, you know, he's going to Abin and he's had, you know, near misses where either his friends noticed it or he's noticed it, or he's done what he's called like a hands up check. So he's gone to lean back on his abseil, he's still clipped into the belay, he's leant back just so he could see as much as he can without the clutter of his hands being in the way. But he also he gave a talk at a nuclear power station, and they kind of asked him, how do you overcome complacency? And he's like, well, we have this and this and this. And they're like, well, let me just, I'll have to find my glasses. Are they behind here? You know, they have things where they're basically, people get rotated out every half hour. If people say we need a stop, we just stop, and it's a no questions asked stop. And yeah, there's, you know, if you follow Will Gadd, you should be able to find this and read about it. It's very interesting. I don't know whether, so this is climbing again, and it's like, it's a video of somebody goes to bump, it's the weekend whipper, somebody goes to bump up a cam, and we can see what happens. He says, so he's like gripped. He's like, yeah, I'll just get that a little higher so it's above my waist. You know, you think you take it out momentarily, and
The most common reason why I've seen people.
And so he goes on to explain that this is often due to people getting scared in the moment, so they're not actually in a very good position to move it up. And actually, if you are going to bump cams, getting to a really solid position before you do. Yeah, it's quite hard. I've definitely climbed in America where you get quite splitter cracks for a long way, and often you don't have enough cams, so like moving them up is kind of a necessary evil if you don't have like 27 of the same cam. Yeah, it's just another little thing of the weekend whipper. What are we on here? Oh yeah, this is, I'll let it play out. I'll click the thing on.
Nice, come on.
So she's fine. She doesn't hit the ground, so it's not like snuff. But I think it's a really good example of any gear that's, you know, a bolt, an abseil station, it's all abandoned equipment and, you know, a peg, and that we need to treat it like that. Now with bolts, we're a little bit, you know, they're less prone to failure, but they do fail. But yeah, it's just one of those things. This is one of like Echo Wall. This is James Pearson. I think it's recent. I don't know. It just popped up on my feed. Echo Wall was a route by Dave McLeod. I don't think he wanted to grade it at the time because, you know, it was really hard. And for what it sounds like, Dave didn't actually put as much gear in as James did. But yeah.
Climbing on it, and is generally well protected. The second half is a lot bolder. The climbing's thankfully a lot easier, though there is a really tricky boulder problem right at the end in a place where you really don't want to fall. So the first half of the route is mainly protected by small friends like this one, as well as a couple of sliders. And generally speaking, they are good if they're placed well. The problem is that you're having to place them in the middle of really physically difficult crux moves where you can't really hang around to make sure it's well placed. If you know that the gear is good, it almost feels like sport climbing. But the thing that makes it so interesting is that you have to make these very, very quick decisions to decide whether the gear is well placed enough to continue pushing forwards. Once you get to the end of this steeper section, you get a really
Looks
good
properly
knee bar
wild
rest.
though, doesn't it?
Luckily,
I think
this
it's
allows you
like
to recover
a
well
very
enough for the
wild
boulder problem
looking,
above, which is actually the physical crux of the route. It's a
wild
really
looking photo.
fingery, very technical and difficult boulder problem.
So yeah,
around
there's
about,
that to
7C
keep you going.
difficulty,
And then
and
this
I
last
also
one.
personally don't really fit quite into the box, so I'm not able to use my feet as well as it seemed like Dave could.
So this is just a little video, and it's of some guy, and he was like, when were you most scared for your life? And it was like, he's working a new route, and it was, you know, he actually said it was the abseil, and you know, he went to abseil off this flake, and his friends said, I said, okay, we'll back it up, and he's put a cam behind this already questionable flake, which is not backing it up. So yeah, let's just play it. Go down to the bottom. But yeah, again, just think to yourself, I've talked about this a little bit in the past, like climbers' economics when it comes to descending, by not, you know, stopping and placing, you know, if there's another wire or anything around there, that you just leave a wire, a cam and a sling behind to abseil off, as well as this dodgy flake. That actually, if you take the sling and the cam and the wire away and you just go off the flake, you're kind of saying your life is worth less than a wire, a cam and a sling, you know, which is less than £50. So, you know, I always think it's climate economics are crazy when it comes to stuff like this.
One of the most scared I've been on the rope was in Rocky Mountain National Park, working with Nathan Brown on a new route he was doing. We weren't pushing it all the way to the top, and so we had to rappel off of this flake that's, I don't know, big football size. That was the established anchor for that route. I don't know how that came to be. I'm assuming just probably only has 3 ascents, and nobody was double checking to make sure it's actually solid. And I remember Nathan, I was like, dude, I really don't want to do this. And he was like, oh, we'll back it up. And he puts a 7.5 behind the same flake that we have slow. I'm like, that is not how that works. And he just laughs.
Yeah, so when you put a cam behind something and you weight it, it actually pushes it out on the flake. So it's actually going to make it more likely to explode off, which is what this guy's talking about. So, you know, people that are out there doing like really hard things, it doesn't necessarily mean they necessarily understand the full dynamics of what occurs or what gear is rated for. And yeah, so quite a few things there, some things to learn from, some things to maybe not look forward to, me talking about the Mountain Rescue England Wales stats. But yeah, just think about, yeah, I think it's interesting, like Robbie's video was great for like that, you know, top 5% of climbers that, you know, need to worry about that sort of thing. But for the majority of climbers, and if you I'll see if I can do it now, actually. I don't know how. Logbooks. Is it in the latest ascents? No. There used to be a thing in logbooks where you could look at like the recent top ascents, and you could actually look at all of the ascents and in a graph, and pretty much it suggested that most people climb VS and below, with a few people at HVS, and then it starts to drop off. And so yeah, it's just one of those things that you kind of have to, you know, we often hear about the people that are in that top 1 to 5%, but actually the majority of people are climbing, you know, VS and actually and below. And actually, when you look at the accident reports of that, what's really important is then learning to place good gear and understand, you know, things like early runners getting flicked up and out, and how that, you know, if you go sort of along this way and up this way, when you fall, this comes down, this pulls up, this bit will be pulled out in this direction. And and I hopefully try and do some videos on that with, like, I guess it might be bits of string and a little board of things, but I'll come up with something that I think will work, and we'll just see how well it works. But yeah, thanks for listening. Hopefully you've not run out of needles to stick in your eyes yet. I will just turn all this stuff off until